for the train to Jordan, picking up passengers coast to coast. Faith is the key, open the doors of boredom. There's hope for all among those loved the most.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of the James Baldwin God's Revolutionary Voice podcast, brought to you by the Saturday Free School for Philosophy and Black Liberation. My name is Shantanu,
And I'm Serafina.
and this podcast is a part of the Year of Baldwin celebrations in Philadelphia. 2024 marks the 100th birth anniversary of the revolutionary James Arthur Baldwin, and this citywide celebration that the Saturday Free School is planning is in honor of his revolutionary life. For more information about the Saturday Free School, please visit saturdayfreeschool.org. And for more information about the various events that we are planning for this year as part of the Year of James Baldwin celebration, please visit jamesbaldwin.org. We at the Saturday Free School believe that America and as well as most of the world is in a state of deep crisis. And when we are in this state of deep crisis, Baldwin teaches us, and so does a lot of other people who we follow, that the ideological struggle becomes the foremost struggle. The struggle for ideas becomes very, very important in such a situation. And we believe in fighting when this time moment comes. We believe in fighting for a better future. We believe that, first of all, there is a future, there is a sky, and that we can get there through these ideas. Over the last couple of years, there has been a concerted effort by the ruling elite of this country to try and separate ideas from the people. But ideas can never exist separate from the people. They are of them, they come from them, and they are for them. And so, as we read James Baldwin throughout this year as part of this podcast, we will get to know more in detail about what that really means. And as we discuss the ideas of James Baldwin, it will all become extremely apparent. Joining me here today are our colleagues from the Saturday Free School and the core organizing committee of the Year of Baldwin, Dr. Anthony Monteiro, Emily Dong, and Alice Lee. Good to have you all here.
Today we entitle our episode Witness and Prophecy. We understand James Baldwin as a witness to the Third American Revolution, Martin Luther King Jr., as it informs today in our crisis. Prophecy because of Baldwin's moral commitment that created him a writer and a revolutionary, using and giving a certain language for our moment in time. And we would like for the co-organizers to start reading the Year of Baldwin vision statement as we had gone over yesterday's inauguration ceremony.
But before that, I just wanted to ask the organizing committee to talk a little bit about the Year of Baldwin, to sort of try and tell everybody who might be watching what is planned for the year, what is the broad vision, and what can we expect for this coming year.
So, in the free school, and as Serafina and Shantanu were speaking to, we are in a crisis of the role of the ruling elite, and a crisis of the people as well. But what we also believe is that there is a way out. With James Baldwin, he gives us a way to make sense of the crisis and the path forward. And it is with the Year of Baldwin that we seek to introduce the kind of man he was and also his ideas to ground the people of Philadelphia, most importantly, and also those throughout the nation. This includes Chicago, Santa Fe, and Albuquerque, New Mexico, and also India. So key to the Year of Baldwin are the different reading groups that are part of a broader literacy campaign for the Year of Baldwin um, in the city of Philadelphia and at the various places aforementioned will be at churches, mosques, libraries, schools, in which we will read the words of James Baldwin and also see clips of his speeches and conversations. In addition to these different reading groups will be symposiums, events, such as the one yesterday in which we launched the Year of James Baldwin. Emily will speak to the future events in just a second, but those are the two core pieces along with the podcast that we have today.
Yeah, yesterday, it's exciting because yesterday we just inaugurated and officially declared 2024 the year of James Arthur Baldwin, God's revolutionary voice in Philadelphia. And I just wanted to say that I'm so excited to talk about it on this podcast because there's no better city to really do justice to James Baldwin, the revolutionary thinker. And like this podcast is titled A Witness and a Prophet for Today. And like Alice was saying, to really inspire the people, not just in Philadelphia, but of the whole country to realize that we have already exactly what we need to make things better in a time when it's very clear that the ruling elite, like Alice said, cannot rule. And despite the crisis, that there's also opportunity for the people to really take power and to decide the future and put it in their own hands. And so we were really excited yesterday to inaugurate the Year of James Baldwin at the Free Library of Philadelphia, the Central Branch. And like Alice said, in addition to the literacy campaign, we're really excited for the upcoming events throughout the year, for there to be similar events that really bring people together to celebrate the James Baldwin who speaks to Philly and also speaks to the time today. So our next event, we're hoping to be April 4th. That's a very significant date because it is the day when Martin Luther King Jr. gave his famous but also very important and, if anything, very relevant speech for today for us to hear. It's the speech, Time to Break Silence, Why I Oppose the War in Vietnam. And it is also the day that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And so we're going to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s courageous speech. It's something that James Baldwin in particular talks a lot about. Martin Luther King Jr., not just the leader, the man, but also how courageous he was. And also, James Baldwin, he's known as a writer, but he's also very much an anti-war, pro-peace freedom fighter. And we hope to highlight James Baldwin on April 4th. I know I'm supposed to be brief here, but more events coming up. The biggest event I think will be the month of August, which is a significant month because it's the month when James Baldwin was born. It's his birthday, so that will officially mark his 100th birth anniversary. And we're excited because we'll have hopefully a public exhibit which will be hosted by multiple institutions throughout the city, including the Free Library. And we'll put out a call to revolutionary artists and poets to contribute to this public display, public art exhibit of culture for James Baldwin, who hopefully will talk a bit about it later. We believe he is a gift to humanity and a gift to the people today, and we hope to really show that in August. So I'll stop there for the symposiums and let Tony come in.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. I mean, I'm so excited about this podcast because I think it will be a way of reaching the people of this country and the people of the world with the ideas of one of the great thinkers of the modern world, James Baldwin. And I'm so glad that you all named this first episode Witness and Prophecy, because yesterday, as we inaugurated 2024 as the year of James Arthur Baldwin, we were witnesses to him and to his prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
and as a revolutionary. And of course, we've been preparing for this year for over 9 months, maybe a little more. And I've been working with all of you. And I must say that the inauguration was worthy of the people of Philadelphia
Hmm.
and worthy of the people of this nation. It was a dignified event.
Right.
And so, uh, as my colleagues have said, we have a lot of work to do this year. uh, and I must say, I enjoy it completely. I enjoy working with members of the Saturday Free School. Um, and with that, I'll turn it back to you, Shantanu and Serafina.
Yes, this podcast is going to be about reading the works of James Baldwin, understanding them, getting his words and his ideas out there. But today we are going to take this episode to read the vision statement for the Year of Baldwin, because I feel like it is important to establish a framework of how we see James Baldwin. We see him as a revolutionary, a freedom fighter, not just a writer, not just an artist. He was a revolutionary, and that means something. And a lot of that comes out in the vision statement that we read yesterday, and we will again today, and we'll have a conversation about it. So I would like to ask Emily and Alice to please lead us through this vision statement. And for those who are watching us, we'll have the vision statement up on the screen for you here to read. This is from our website, yearofjamesbaldwin.org. Please go visit it. It has a enormous amount of resources for you to check out. And we'll also have the link with the vision statement on the ticker here and in the video description as well. So whenever you're ready, Al, take it away.
James Arthur Baldwin, God's Revolutionary Voice, in celebration of the 100th anniversary of his birth. This year is the 100th anniversary of the birth of James Arthur Baldwin, August 2nd, 1924 to December 1st, 1987. The Year of James Baldwin is a celebration of him and his literary, philosophical, cultural, artistic, and ideological genius, and his contributions to the revolutionary remaking of world humanity. Baldwin was arguably America's greatest novelist and perhaps the greatest essayist in the history of the English language. He spoke through the language of the Old Testaments and the Gospels of the Bible, and the language of the modern world's search for meaning. Speaking through the book of Revelations, the last book of the New Testament, he declared as a warning to America, God gave Noah the rainbow sign, no more water, the fire next time. This unique intersection produced a creative way to explain America. He probed the complexities of the American mind, his principal concern, through the lenses of the aspirations and struggles of the African American working people. He was a teacher. For him, knowing carried with it the responsibility to teach, and teaching was a way of changing people's consciousness, allowing them to become agents in the transformation of the world. Hence, in its deepest sense, his life's work was the moral, spiritual, and political education of the people. He believed in people, and he believed in ideas. As such, he believed in human possibility. He believed that ideas, when embraced by the people, are perhaps the most beautiful and powerful weapon of the people. Few have gone as far and as deep as Baldwin in exploring human possibilities and probing the rich inner lives of people. He examined the contradictions, paradoxes, and complexities of the modern situation. Through it all, he remained an optimist, believing in the revolutionary and emancipatory potentialities of human beings. He saw himself as a witness in the Old Testament sense, as a witness for the truth. It is this witness that inspired in him a profound empathy towards and passion for the poor and oppressed, especially children. His witness for the truth sparked a fire in him which never went out. He insisted that to know the truth is as much a question of moral striving as it is of rational and scientific thought. It was for him the truth discovered in moral striving, especially for freedom, where art meets and intersects with the revolutionary imperative. Artists and writers must, he declared, strive to be on the right side of history and on the right side of the people's revolutionary struggles for freedom. Too often, we only know Baldwin through the narrow views of academics and elite intellectuals, and not through him as a revolutionary and freedom fighter. James Baldwin, a revolutionary for this time. Baldwin's worldview was neither tragic nor nihilistic. It was revolutionary. He avoided what he saw as farcical reinventions of worlds that only existed in the minds of their inventors, seeing them as ways to avoid the crises of the modern world. He at once saw them as anti-revolutionary. Revolution and prophecy defined Baldwin. He prophetically declared that the trajectory of American history, if not changed, would lead to the crisis we now face. He believed that a new American democracy was possible, but it required the people achieving power in their own name. Baldwin viewed the Black freedom movement as a revolutionary movement, and Martin Luther King Jr. as a unique revolutionary. He saw whiteness as an identity that undermined the full democratic consciousness of white Americans and all Americans. He viewed imperialist and colonial wars, such as in Vietnam, Algeria, and Africa, as a work of anti-democratic and anti-revolutionary forces. In the end, he saw revolution as not adhering to a set of doctrines, but as a practice rooted in and coming from the people. History and the logic of historical change grounded his thinking. As a revolutionary, Baldwin lives and breathes life into those activists and movements that discover him.
Art, literature, and the revolutionary imperative. Art and literature were for him the poetics of the excavation of things seen and unseen. The writer, therefore, did not exist in him or herself, as the bourgeois aesthetic might have it, but as part of the lives of ordinary working people. Art and literature shaped the moral conditions for community and struggle. They were, for Baldwin, acts of love, dedicated to the truth and to the people. They were part of a revolutionary commitment. And as art and literature flow from love, in Baldwin's hands, they become forms of revolutionary love for humanity. His novels, poems, and plays capture the human essence and human striving. His characters collide with the reality of America. The paradox of human striving and the reality of oppression produce psychological and ideological pathologies. His characters struggle with their identities and tragedies in the face of historic injustice. This is a search not just for resolution, but for completeness as human beings. His artistic and literary imagination emerged from a special consciousness, a Black proletariat imaginary, a futuristic imagination. This is an aesthetic anchored to the imagination of Black people, flowing from their history. Baldwin was, therefore, inspired by poetic narratives of artists like Bessie Smith, Billie Holiday, Dinah Washington, Nina Simone, Aretha Franklin, Donny Hathaway, and Patti LaBelle, and composers such as Duke Ellington, Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Curtis Mayfield, and Marvin Gaye. While his literary works took on concrete form in the life worlds of Americans and Black folk, they capture the universally human and universally concrete, the real that is present throughout humanity in all its many forms. As a revolutionary force, art and literature take on civilizational consequences. This is to say, art and literature become part of humanity's striving to achieve new civilizations, anchored to a new people and new systems of economy and politics. Literature, in Baldwin's sense, is both the present and the future, because it is part of humanity's strivings. Baldwin asks, is it possible, out of the ashes and ruin of imperialism and racism, for a new world civilization to arise? His answer was yes, and we must fight to make it so. For Baldwin, language and morality meet on the battlefield for a new civilization and a new American people. Literature creates new language to address new moments in history, from which new grammars and vocabularies exploring both the interior lives of modern people and the world historic situation arise. Language in Baldwin's work provides ways of thinking and knowing. He is constantly working out new language, new grammars, and new and unusual ways of writing, creating revolutionary language for revolutionary times. In his work, language is not merely reflective of society, it is generative of new human beings. Language for him can be futuristic and imaginative of what can become. Baldwin viewed this as a measure of art and literature living up to their revolutionary responsibility. The Black Church and the Empire of Eternity. At 17 years old, Baldwin left the church after being a youth preacher for 3 years. Yet, the Black Church never left him. The Black Church, as he experienced it, had become too satisfied with the world as it was, rather than the world as it must become. It had become confined to the colony of time, rather than striving towards the empire of eternity. It had ceased to strive for cosmic partnership. Hence, for Baldwin, as for Martin Luther King Jr., it is in the struggles for freedom and truth that humans achieve immortality, the empire of eternity. In Martin Luther King Jr., the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, and the Black freedom movement, Baldwin found Black leaders who thought and acted within the Black prophetic tradition. Each, in his own way, saw Black folk as the people for whom the prophets of old spoke. They were the people of the book, and the people of the Bible and the Quran. For each, prophecy inspired struggle. Each saw in prophecy the acknowledgement of a cosmic partnership between freedom fighters and the infinite, that which is beyond the individual, the personal, society, and even history.
Pan-Africa and a New America. Baldwin anchored his intellectual and literary works within the ideological history of the modern world. He saw the period after World War II as one where the peoples of the darker and colonized nations were on the move. He became an outspoken supporter of the anti-colonial movements and of Pan-Africanism. He viewed the anti-colonial and Pan-African movements as connected to the Black freedom movement. At the same time, he argued for what was in essence the unity of Pan-Africa and Pan-Asia into a mighty anti-colonial and anti-imperialist movement. As he said in the essay Princes and Powers, the artist must be part of the world historic changes, challenging Western modernity and its colonial and white supremacist assumptions and practices. In this respect, Baldwin intellectually demolished the empty assumption that Western democracy was the same as freedom. He insisted that for most of the world's peoples, Western democracy meant slavery, colonialism, and oppression. Therefore, the path to freedom was not to imitate Western democracy, which had been appropriated by elites for whom democracy was nothing more than a hypocritical moral veil disguising their racism and exploitation. Baldwin, rather, insisted a new democracy had to be created, a new people's democracy emerging from the histories and civilizations of the Afro-Asiatic world. Baldwin, therefore, championed the Indian independence movement, the Chinese Revolution, the African independence movements, the Cuban Revolution, and the Black freedom movement as part of a single garment of destiny. To be on the right side of history meant for him to stand with the liberation of Africa and Asia. In this moment in history, This unity constitutes an Afro-Asiatic reconfiguration of the world, a recentering of humanity in a new civilizational axis. The revolutionary potentiality of children and youth. Baldwin believed that every generation must prepare those who follow to stand up for justice. In a letter to his nephew in the book The Fire Next Time, he insisted that to make a world worthy of the young, the youth and children must fight for it. The moral, spiritual, and political education of children and youth was uppermost in his activity. He argued that children and youth had to be treated with respect and dignity, and their ideas and worldviews taken seriously. He believed that children and youth were a force for change and a force that might decide the future. Baldwin loved children and youth of every race and creed. However, he loved the children and youth in particular who bore the burdens and legacies of oppression, who struggled for dignity and a future that required the completion of the freedom struggles started by their ancestors. He demanded that white children and youth be taught to reject white identity and white supremacy, that they see themselves through the suffering and histories of the darker races. White children and youth must identify themselves with humanity, whose majority is not white. At last, Baldwin is a saint for children and youth. He is for them Saint Baldwin.
Baldwinian love and the revolutionary struggle. Love is a paramount concern in Baldwin's fiction and essays. Even when he is speaking about romantic love, he is addressing the desire for community and human solidarity. It is an irrepressible desire for wholeness. Love is for him the language of striving and wanting to be fulfilled in relationship with others. He insisted that America would only achieve what was possible if the brokenness and fragmentation of society rooted in white supremacy are overcome. Baldwin saw white supremacy as an anti-love, anti-community, and anti-human impulse. Part of the brokenness of modern capitalist society is its undermining of love in the rush to turn human relationships into commodities, serving private profit, wealth, and war. In its many forms, love manifests the human striving to be fully human. In essence, it reflects the idea that we are all wrapped in a single garment of destiny. It is a recognition, mostly unarticulated, of a human striving to be human. Love acknowledges that we are human to the extent that we exist in community with others. In its highest expression, love is a revolutionary act. Love is a condition, in Baldwin's work, not just for community with others, but for revolutionary change. We are socialized to lie about this basic striving. Baldwin identified this with bad faith. To the degree that human beings strive for and achieve love, to that same degree are they committing to revolutionary change. Baldwin would have agreed with Martin Luther King that love is the sword that heals society. To the degree that love is a central value of society, there is a human future. Even when exploring his own sexuality and the multiple varied sexual and gender identities in the modern world, Baldwin refused to reduce love into anything but a striving to create new human beings in new societies. Sexual and romantic love were the initial stage of a great quest to create and be in human communities. Harkening back to early communities and societies, Baldwin saw love as a desire for a communal form of life, unfettered by capitalism. Reflecting on love and Christian salvation in his last published essay entitled To Crush the Serpent, he says, quote, "Complexity is our only safety, and love is the only key to our maturity." End quote. Baldwin is saying, despite the complexities and ambiguities of life, community is our safety, and love is the key to our becoming new people. It is our salvation.
The future. We are entering a new and dynamic epoch in history. People, through their actions and voices, are deciding the future. The path through which Americans will achieve a new nation is the Black Freedom Movement and the vision it gifted the American people. As such, the American people, in a dynamic struggle, could throw off the shackles of whiteness and white supremacy and free themselves from spiritual death. In what Baldwin called achieving our nation, a new civilization and a new American man and woman could be born. In the year of James Arthur Baldwin, God's revolutionary voice, Baldwin will speak to Philadelphia, and Philadelphia will speak back to him. In his words, to achieve our country and to make America the last white nation, we celebrate the great genius and prophet James Baldwin. Alas, in Baldwin's name, we dedicate this year of Baldwin to the immortal Palestinian children of Gaza, to their suffering, their courageousness, and their future.
Are we muted? Yeah,
Well, there was a lot. There was a lot in that.
emotional.
And of course, it's deeply emotional, it's deeply thought provoking.
Mm.
And I would like to start this discussion. There's so much in this, and I know we can't get through all of it today, but maybe broadly we'll be able to discuss what this vision statement is about. And so the first the first thing that I wanted to really discuss is um, the title of this podcast, the title of the entire year. Why have we decided to call this James Baldwin God's revolutionary voice? What is the implication of exactly that of that title? You know, why are we calling James Arthur Baldwin a black man who was a freedom fighter and a revolutionary? Why are we calling him God's revolutionary voice? And according to me, the way that I go about thinking about this um, is mostly in three parts. And I was thinking about it while Alice and Emily were reading this. What was his revolutionary contribution? Where does it come from? What was it rooted in? And what is the kind of language that he used to get his message across to people? And what I think is Baldwin, as a man who had such a great faith in human potential and their um, and his belief in children to be the future, I believe that his revolutionary contribution was bringing into the consciousness of the people that, you know, when you are in a crisis, you have to struggle for ideas. You have to, and the only way that you can achieve a higher form of freedom is through the struggle for ideas. And then you come to where it comes from. What was it rooted in? And I believe it was rooted in the Black prophetic tradition. It comes from the same place that King's ideas came from, and the most honorable Elijah Muhammad's ideas came from, in the Black prophetic tradition, where you believe in prophecy, where you believe that the Black people were the people of the book. And then you come to the kind of language that he used, which was not merely reflective of society, but generative, because that ties into again our title of this episode, which is Witness and Prophecy. You know, he was a witness for the people, and his language was generative of the times. His language was generative of revolution. His It wasn't descriptive, it was imaginative and futuristic. he he almost foreshadows the crisis of today, and he prophetically says that, you know, the way that you have to get yourself out of this crisis is through one thing only, which is love for other people. And I think that in this vision statement and my idea of Baldwin, that one thing stands quite quite apart, that his belief in love for humanity,
Mm,
and how that could be the force for change,
mm,
and I
mhm,
believe that he said that love is a battle, love is a war, love is a growing up. That's the only way that you can really attain a kind of maturity and freedom. So I wanted the Dr. Monteiro, Alice, and Emily to comment on this. Why have we named it God's the Revolutionary Voice?
Well, Shantanu, I think you set it up very well. And this is a very complex set of issues because, we often are forced to contrast the thoughts and ideas of a person like James Baldwin with, let us say, the thoughts and ideas of major figures of the European Enlightenment, the philosophers, scientists, and of course the great revolutionary thinkers such as Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin. Uh, and for the majority of radical thinkers in the United States, it is difficult for them to understand how Baldwin is a revolutionary thinker.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what we are saying is that the Black freedom movement, especially what we call the Third American Revolution, what some generally call the Black Civil Rights Movement, um, that has left a stamp upon history and upon consciousness. And Baldwin, uh, in his writings, essays, and novels, poetry, uh, frames the ideological character of the Black freedom movement,
mhm, mhm, mhm,
speaks to what even the best European radical thinkers and thinkers whose ideas are linked to the European Enlightenment, Baldwin addresses what they do not see and are unable to address. That capitalism produces alienation, it produces coldness, it produces anti people, anti human impulses. And in many ways, these impulses exist in most of us. And so Baldwin is thinking of ways to repair the human being so the human being could repair society. Um, this is in some ways, a paradigm shift, but not so much a shift, I would argue, as a further advancement of revolutionary thought. Now, of course, there are people who would say, well, why would you associate a revolutionary with God? And so on. And of course, we are talking almost allegorically
Mm-hmm.
that uh, that God symbolically represents the great truths and the great strivings of human beings, especially in the Black, Christian, and Muslim traditions. If you know, get below the surface, what are Black folks saying
Mm-hmm.
when they sing of, when they pray to, when they embrace God? It is not the God of the white imaginary. It is the God of the oppressed people.
mhm,
And so God's revolutionary voice is the revolutionary voice of the oppressed who are striving and fighting to be free.
mhm, mhm,
the other thing, just prophecy, and I will end with this point. The prophetic is a, you say, a referencing in some ways of the poetic voice of the oppressed. Prophecy is not daydreaming. Prophecy is anchorage. It is both spiritual and concrete. And its highest form is in art and literature. And so with James Baldwin, art is the vehicle through which prophecy speaks to the people. That's the way I would put it, Shantanu.
Yeah, that's that was deep. That I really felt it when you said that. He helps repair human beings so they can repair society, and that's I think that's why he has so much faith in children. That's why he says that children are sacred, because he sees the path to a better future in them. That is why he talks so much about the moral and spiritual education
Yeah.
of children. You know. Um, Oh, before I forget, people who are watching at home, please free to comment, and we will read your comments whenever we get them, so that you can interact with us. The whole reason why this is a live stream is so that we can interact. So please engage uh, whenever you want.
Shantanu, may I just add one other thing, if you
Of
don't
course,
mind?
of course, of course.
As you say, the vision statement is a very complex document.
Yep, yep.
Um, and even as I listened to it, I realized the difficulty of capturing all of it in one reading. It is a vision, not a declaration. And just there's a part in it that might be difficult for many people to understand why it is there. And that is the concept of the colony of time and the
Empire of eternity.
of eternity. This comes from Martin Luther King Jr. And in a lot of ways, just parenthetically, one can see a dialogue between Martin Luther King and James Baldwin. And this idea of time, a colony of time, time as we understand it, can confine one to time and to a time.
Right.
But we must strive to go beyond time and its confinement as we understand that, to something beyond that, to a new imaginary, a new possibility, a new way of looking at ourselves in relationship to, well, what King called a cosmic partnership. A partnership with a universe emerging in time and space. And I think, in reading Baldwin, one sees all of this working their way out. Him dealing with the most difficult, but at the same time, the most common human beings. So I just wanted to draw attention to that.
Yeah, what you just said was really deep, because pointing out the depth of, and there's something really powerful about the word dialogue, because I had just seen, and this is because I had made that documentary that we premiered at the inauguration yesterday, but there was a clip that I thought about using. But in some ways, I don't think Baldwin ever had the chance, at least not that I know of, to say it out loud and develop it, where Baldwin was like, a dialogue was able to start when King and Malcolm and Medgar Evers were alive, but specifically, let's say King. And Baldwin makes the point where he says, and Martin is dead, Malcolm is dead, Medgar is dead, but does that mean the dialogue must be dead? You know what I mean? And so in some ways, yeah, it's this thing of time, like, yes, Martin was killed, but the dialogue did not have to die. You know what I mean? And I also thought the way you framed it as like cosmic partnership, this thing of that a lot of, yeah, I also have always thought hard about how do you describe that cosmic partnership, because why is it that I feel it so badly but I don't know how to articulate it. And I like the way you said that in some ways it's like what Baldwin but also King in the same way encouraged was an individual to develop a partnership with a universe that emerges out of time and space. But in some ways, I guess I see it as almost like an individual developing a relationship with, when we say God, it could mean many things, but basically an individual developing a relationship with a universe that you know can exist. Or like you, in some ways I connect it to like a nation or a universe, a future that you know can exist, but requires you to first believe in it and then build it. Like it's in it, that's eternity. In some ways, it's both a concrete, but it's also a not yet thing. If you know what I'm talking about. And that brings me to my last point that I wanted to respond to, which is you were addressing. I know we cut out a little bit here, but you were addressing the connection between God and revolution, God's revolutionary voice, because I find it so interesting, especially leftists, white leftists, Marxists, who, and this is nothing against Marx the man, it's about the people who use Marx today. But I think it's interesting that there's a reluctance to see someone like James Baldwin as both a revolutionary philosopher and the almost discomfort with like the connection between God and revolution, because it's also in some ways, like I was thinking about the Chinese revolution, right? People say, oh, Chinese revolution is revolutionary because they were into communism, they were into Marx, they were into Lenin. But actually the primary thing that someone like Mao always talked about was, I believe the Chinese people are magical. Like I believe the Chinese people can perform miracles. God, almost like it's that Chinese spirit, God, like there's something about God's revolutionary, and so, and that's also to say that I think James Baldwin is not just a revolutionary voice, God's revolutionary voice for his own people who, like we heard, he felt this impulse to say, like, why is it that you don't love this country enough to change it?
Yeah.
But it's also this thing of, I think the world needs James Baldwin. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? And I really feel that way because of what you said, Doc. The depth, the advancement, the revolutionary advancement in thought, the way James Baldwin connected the individual, that interior life, to the external, and even this cosmic partnership thing where, like, I think that phrase that Shantanu like repeated that you said, to repair the human being so they can repair society. I mean, that's not just an American thing. At this point, it's a world task because unfortunately, like we talked about in free school, we're moving from a age of Europe to the age of the Afro-Asiatic reconstitution. Like we're talking about a world that is aching to change and must be changed. Like we've all been affected by like there is a dominant thought that has impacted the darker peoples of the world, that has traumatized, however you want to say, has traumatized the people of the world, that like anywhere from India to China, like there's a desperate need to repair the human being, to repair society. And so I just wanted to make that last point too.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on that cosmic partnership had popped up in my forefront, like when we had reread it. And it makes me think that the document written, I agree with you, Doc, is a vision, a certain framework that also has a way to or needs to be investigated. Um, but also the reason why I was thinking about it is because of this idea that we're bringing up in the vision statement that love is a revolutionary force.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to bring up a short clip from the Going to Meet the Man documentary made in 1970, where Baldwin is speaking in his mentor and almost father figure, Buford Delaney's studio to younger, his, the youth of his time, people. And, you could see Baldwin in many ways, whether that be in his writing or in his speaking. But another way that I know we learn about the Black prophetic tradition, as it were, really, is also embedded in Baldwin's body language and the way that he speaks to young people with what we're talking about. Why would he care so deeply, and why would that necessitate him to um, even write Go Tell It on the Mountain, or Another Country? So I just wanted to show a brief clip to kind of get also or bridge this conversation between the cosmic partnership and how love almost creates a new, or like you were saying, Emily, like a like the baby that wants to be born, pushing out that moment. So I will ask Perba or Crystal.
This is what is irreducible and awful. You the English, you the French, you the West, you the Christians. You can't help but feel that there is something that you can do for me. That you can save me. And you don't yet know that I have endured your salvation so long. I cannot afford it anymore. Not another moment of your salvation.
But I'm not saying your
And that I can save you. I know something about you.
Right on, tell him. Give it to him.
I know something about you. You don't know anything about me.
Amen. Right on.
Amen. Time to find
And that
out.
is where it really is. There may not be, as much humanity in the world as one would like to see. But there is some. There's more than one would think. In any case, if you break faith with what you know, that's a betrayal of many, 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 many people. I may know 6 people, but that's enough. Love has never been a popular movement, and no one's ever wanted really to be free. The world is held together, really it is held together, by the love and the passion of very few people. Otherwise, of course, you can despair. Walk down the street of any city, any afternoon, and look around you. What you got to remember is what you're looking at is also you. Everyone you're looking at is also you. You could be that person. You could be that monster. You could be that cop. And you're to decide in yourself not to be.
Yeah, just there's always so much. There's always so much to really, because even this thing about you don't know something about me, but I know something about you, it comes into the conversation that we're also having. Like, what we're talking about is kind of what will make it possible to break into a new world, like into a new universe, like we're saying. And Jeremiah had mentioned in the comments that prophecy is both law and chance. He's saying prophecy is both law and chance. It is a direct intervention by the people onto the stage of history through poetic narrative, a reaching toward a higher consciousness and a new social reality. And then Jahan also mentions in comments that the cosmic partnership discussion reminds him of the Hegel's triad of being, non-being, and becoming. And so he thinks that maybe King and Baldwin were drawing on the imaginary and poetry to fully develop this concept concretely as it's like Third American Revolution, or even to be used further to our present. And that is also the core crux of what we're speaking toward. What is the heart of the matter? And I think, like in the vision statement, when you talk about that we are socialized to lie about this basic striving of love, it also gets to this fact that there is a people of the American culture that is supposed to be and is also having a kind of double consciousness struggle, like a kind of struggle to become itself. And then you also say that Baldwin identified this with bad faith. To the degree that human beings strive for and achieve love, to that same degree, they are committing to revolutionary change, which I also think is specific, because when I also had mentioned that Baldwin is a writer because of his moral obligation to write, that moral obligation is also what makes him a revolutionary. And it's easy to say, well, yes, he is a writer, and thus you um, you know, describe, like you're saying, the world around you. But I think what we're mentioning is that there is something in the human being, something in either Baldwin or Baldwin's contemporaries like Faulkner or Richard Wright, something in these people that also either committed morally to revolutionary change or had to lie about a certain fact of life that is occurring in America. Because the other thing that you mentioned is that complexity, that quote of the to crush a serpent, which I also particularly enjoyed. Like, complexity is our only safety, which is almost, contrary to itself. And love is the only key to our maturity, like Shantanu, you were saying before. And then you write that Baldwin is saying that it is despite the complexities and ambiguities of life, community is our only safety. And love is the key to becoming a new people. It is our salvation. And I couldn't help but every time that I was giving, because me and Shantanu also read the vision statement in yesterday's inauguration event, I couldn't help but get emotional. And like you were saying, Doc, like when I'm saying emotional, it's saying the spiritual quality is defining itself. And what that also means is that when we're speaking of people and their strivings, because when we're talking about the slave or the Black American, right, you're also talking about the blues, you're talking about what like the culture that makes America, right? Like, and culture is not in of itself, but it is because of the way that people act, what they value. And I'm only mentioning that because, like you had said, with Emily reading the Bible in a certain way that isn't like, to define laws of relationships, but rather explain scenarios and hypothetical situations that can occur in your own life as very Black, is not to be certain of a person that is only capable of that sense or frame of thinking, but a certain value, a certain worldview that will explain the life worlds of really any individual that would take place in America. But that also means is that the Black church, the spiritual qualities of that prophetic tradition is all encapsulated. It almost is locked in certain chambers when confronted with whiteness, or when, in a sense, not being able to completely deal with whiteness. So when you're bringing up this quality, which is almost in a sense a profound new quality that occurs in America, this quality of love, which is also what I think makes possible Baldwin in our event to be anew in a way. Like, I think there's a certain quality in our event yesterday that was new. There's a certain quality of Baldwin that makes that so. And so I'm just wrapping things together to have a general discussion about why, not only why love, but how is it possible that love is required, or the key to
Yeah.
revolutionary worldview, life worlds, strivings.
Yeah, and what does not being able to love do to a society?
Right.
What does Baldwin mean when he says that America is the least loved nation in the world? It also makes me think about Israel, like how many people love their own country, Israel, for what it's doing.
Mm.
But what you had said also too reminded me of something that a Palestinian reporter Mataz was saying, was that, the one thing that Gaza taught me is that not for me to go to Gaza for myself, but to go to Gaza for Gaza. Because what he learned was community. It's not based on the individual. He's saying that no individual in Gaza are in of themselves, but are for everyone in that sense. Like, because what you're saying, Emily, too, about the magical qualities and like that, that how, like, what I'm saying is the potentials to make what we're talking about concrete exists, obviously, because people are alive. It's also a matter of choice.
Yeah. The philosophical questions raised in the comments by Jahan and Jeremiah, I think we'll have to return to them. And they are very important because they're absolutely right. I mean, Jeremiah is citing or quoting from W.E.B. Du Bois that in history you have both law that are predictable and discoverable, but you also have chance, which introduces a certain randomness and uncertainty into events. But I think I'm going to return to the point raised by Emily about Mao Zedong. In the minds of many people is the quintessential revolutionary. The Chinese Revolution as the quintessential modern revolution. And of course, the Chinese Revolution has many great achievements, and the people produced unbelievable feats, such as the Long March, between the free school studied a few years ago when we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party of China. But what spoke to us was this belief that Mao had in the Chinese people. And it was almost his belief that they were magical, that the Long March proved that the Chinese Revolution could remake history in a matter of decades. And it was Mao kind of had a love affair with the Chinese people in the same way that Baldwin has a love affair with the American people and frankly with the people of the world. This thing that revolutionaries have, which set them aside and make them a vanguard, a leadership. But this idea of revolutionary love And that's one of the things we were trying to get at. And we're still trying to get at in this year of Baldwin. The linking of love and revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that produce in human beings? And I think we are yet to fully discover it. I hope we will at the end of this year. But as we read Baldwin, as we think about Baldwin as a man of the modern world, as we see Baldwin in dialogue with Hegel's dialectics, with Du Bois's double consciousness, with Jean-Paul Sartre's idea of bad faith. Baldwin cannot be separated from the modern world and the intellectual ideological history of the modern world. He is an innovator. He is on the forefront. And the only reason he is not recognized in all these ways is the color line. And he is a black man, and the presence of whiteness
Mm-hmm.
the opposite of Baldwin. But I just wanted to bring that out and kind of emphasize what Emily was saying about Mao's belief in the Chinese people as almost magical.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other connection, it's not as clear because I haven't read enough of Mao, like not just his political theory, but even just who Mao was and his other, whether he's a biography or whatever. But the other thing, well, I want to go back. I want to connect this to love, but also what Serafina brought up with the blues, because, because in some ways, with the vision statement, I think it's really it cuts at the essence of Baldwin to talk about love, because, and I'm gonna connect a lot of things, but I think this is something you said, Doc, where, and it reminds me of Baldwin, where Baldwin says this thing in Meeting the Man. No, maybe not Meeting the Man. He says it in his conversation with Nikki Giovanni. He says, there's something that we Black people in America have. It is an edge that white people who believe they're white or think they're white, do not have. But it is a thing that they must develop. And it is a principle that all civilizations are based on. And that is a sense of life. But when he says a sense of life, what he also means is life. Baldwin always says to be able to live means to be able to love. But also to be able to live and love means to be able to know that you die one day. And
Yeah.
he connects it to the uses of the blues. He says, I didn't have to say the uses of the blues. I could have said the uses of anguish, the uses of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, it is distinctly what makes, in some ways, what Black people have carried, the blues, that also makes Americans, including me or Alice, American. But it's just that it takes us a little longer to translate it because our parents did not teach us it. It is something that we had to be taught by Black people or Baldwin or Tony. You know what I mean? And I wanted to say that because I still see it in some ways in Mao. Like, I'm just conjecturing here, right? But in some ways, it is the century of humiliation, a sense of suffering of your people that also in some ways gives a certain edge or inheritance that makes you so believe my people are magical, my people are capable of something. It comes out of a revolutionary love for your people. I connect it, but I just want to go deeper into this thing of the blues because because also I know that maybe some people listening to this podcast are like, whoa, revolution, God, love, blues. Like, it's a mix of words that not a lot of people connect, but it makes a lot of sense to us. And like, I know for me and Alice, for example, like as children of Chinese immigrants, like I really feel like I really connected so hard to Baldwin as like a revolutionary teacher. And okay, let's just take away the word revolutionary, just a teacher. Someone like Baldwin is such a teacher because he teaches you how to begin to live in this country. And there's something about because I said this in our reading group, one of the satellite reading groups of the Saturday Free School. We were reading The Use of the Blues, and it made me realize this thing where
you, especially if you're a child of immigrants, at least Chinese immigrants, I'll speak for myself. My parents wanted me to be safe. They taught me to be safe. Safe means to be, like, in some ways, the white thing, which is to make things simple, like keep things simple, straight path, like buy a house, buy a car, get married, have kids, have grandkids. But in some ways, you're being taught to die. And it's this thing of to avoid complexity, the complexity of the human experience, which is also to be free of the cold and sterile and honestly dangerous and damning definitions and standards of a white supremacist society, um, whose sole task is to so reduce and simplify to be able to make the people controllable. But that's not human life. And there's a lot more to go into this, but I just think because when Baldwin talks about the blues, he's basically saying it's a, I call it a secret. I know that's not the right word, but he's basically letting the world know of this secret that is required for us to really be free, to first as an individual to actually live, and then make society more livable for people, more living, more humane. But I wanted to bring in the and also I just wanted one last thing is that I really think, and this is something other people in the Society of Free School have said before, and I think like Doc is saying, like we should, it's something I hope that we can talk about, whether it's in the reading groups or through our events, but it's this thing that the blues, it is exactly the blues that makes us American. And in some ways, it's exactly the blues that can make us free. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Alice.
No, I just wanted to build off of what people are saying, because through the year we'll be reading both Baldwin's novels and essays, and I've always, since starting to read Baldwin, I've always wondered why Baldwin wrote these novels, why there are such complex characters in his novels that are, frankly, were hard for me to understand several years ago and even now. And it's because his novels represent the complexities of people and also the complexity of individuals in his novels that are reflective of the complexities of individuals in real life. And he's saying something about the fact that many of us actually don't truly know each other, and especially Black people. And what he's saying is that in examining the interior lives of people, you see actually what racism means. It's not just this broad, vague, abstract term, but actually how does it filter into the lives of people? Like, what are their experiences in life? How does it, for example, his father, a man who came from the South to Harlem and essentially believed what white people said of Black people, which is that they were inferior. But then how did this lead to how his father chose to go into the church as a pastor, the way he treated his family? But at the same time, Baldwin also explains his mother, despite the suffering of Black people, his mother had always taught Baldwin to love people in the way that you want others to love your brothers and sisters when you're not there, to love you when I'm not there. And it's this theme that's pervasive in Baldwin, which is, what is the capacity of people despite the harshness of life, despite the choices that different individuals make. And I think one last thing, I think people were speaking to, like, what does the lack of love do to society? I think Baldwin always had this optimism because he also understood what love can do for a person and to society. And, Baldwin actually had a teacher in high school and she was a white woman who had come from the Midwest, Antioch College,
her family had lost everything during the Great Depression, so she had to drop out of school, then was in the Works Progress Administration in a theater program. And so she was at Baldwin's high school. And it was this white woman, essentially Baldwin, that says, like, for had she not entered my terrifying life at such an early point, I might have hated white people. But their relationship was so critical for him because she had believed in him, um, his talent for writing, but also just how good of a person she saw in him. And, they had gone to plays, museums, movies, and Baldwin said that saved him growing up because he had a poor childhood and there were all these siblings that he had to take care of, which he also loved dearly. Um, and I think that interaction, but also what Baldwin sees as love what can love do for society. And this goes back to the point that Tony, you were talking about, Emily, about a vision for the future. I know I'm trying to figure this out and work this out, which is that one of his last essays was going to be about what Emily was saying, which is Martin Luther King Jr., Medgar Evers, and Malcolm X, all who had been assassinated. And he never completed it, but he titled it "Remember This House." And I'm trying to figure out is ultimately "Remember This House" became "I'm Not Your Negro," which is the film book adaptation. But I actually think Baldwin was trying to say "Remember this house," because this house that King talks about, this world house, this human family, this human nation of America, of brothers and sisters. And it is true where every country, every nation needs a vision that we're striving towards. Like, what is a striving? And I think that's why it's such a huge part of Baldwin, which is also saying, like, dealing with reality first. Because if you believe already that this is a utopia, this is a democracy, then there is no striving that's necessary.
Yes.
And so I guess I say this to emphasize the point of love in repairing the individual, but also repairing society. And then also this concept of vision where we're trying to also revive and give life to America that has become stagnant and we talk about so often.
Yeah. I feel like this concept of love and revolution together has to be understood. I think that they go hand in hand. They can't be separate. Our conversation about Mao today really made me realize that if you don't have a deep sense of love for your people, revolution cannot follow. And
That's right.
and I think that uh, Michelle had a comment which I wanted to read out. It's a Baldwin quote where he says that the war of an artist and his society is a lover's war, and he does at his best what lovers do, which is to reveal the beloved to himself, and with that revelation to make freedom real. To make freedom real. I think that this is what we have been talking about. It encapsulates the essence of is, what love does, how love is necessary,
Well, can
and
I say something? Which is, well, I just want to add in that Meeting the Man, when we were watching that Meeting the Man clip, Baldwin also makes a point there he's having a tug of war with the documentary maker who's white, where he talks about love, right? He says, this is an unloved country, or people don't know how to love. And the documentary maker says, no, but don't you think that everyone loves their child?
Right.
And he says, I don't see evidence of that, because if that was true, then we wouldn't be in a mess. And because I also want to point out that part of step one, I feel like step one before loving is realizing that you don't actually love. Like most people do not love right now. They don't love themselves and they don't love their children, especially I'm talking about white people or people who subscribe to the white standard. And I think that's so important. I feel like it's so important for people to first, because the reason why I think Baldwin's novels are so powerful is because you need to like that collision against society. The way we all collide against society every day is to realize that there is such thing as a society, a prison that is trying to control people, that you do not actually love. Like, no, actually, most white people do not know how to love. And I know white people. I've been around white people, and I hate to say it, but y'all don't love. And I feel bad because I could have been that too. And I think that's what I was taught to even view myself, to not love myself. And I have to say, white families, there is not a lot of love there. And it is because of generation of believing lies. And not, if you don't even know how to love yourself, how are you supposed to pop out babies and love them and raise them like that? And it's really sad. And I just want to bring that in because the quote that Michelle, that comment is, it is a particular kind of artist, a real artist who can reveal the beloved
Yes.
to itself. You know, it is an artist who actually realizes that love is not the normal. Love is the principle that imperialism and white supremacy, white supremacist society like America must destroy. But it is also why an artist, a revolutionary artist, a real artist is so rare today, why someone like James Baldwin is so rare today, and why a revolutionary artist is in pain. But I just want, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Shantanu.
No, go ahead, go ahead. I feel like this is very important. I feel like it is also very important for people to understand what Baldwin means by loving another person or by loving yourself or by loving your child. Because I know that the first thing that pops into people's mind is, no, I love people. I love myself, self care, routines, and all of that. But no, it's not. Baldwinian love is a very, it's a higher state of consciousness almost.
Uh-huh.
It's it is loving another person for a greater freedom, for um for you are struggling towards democracy, freedom, to see your children live in a better future, and you are loving another person for that goal, for that
Yeah.
end result.
Mhm. Mhm.
You have a purpose, and you love yourself in order to get something that you don't have presently for yourself and for your family, for entire humanity. It's a
Well,
concept. Yeah, go ahead.
because love, well, because I'm even talking about basic, okay, I don't know the right word, but basic love. Because remember that clip where Baldwin says, if a teenage girl has a baby at age 16 in Harlem, we don't stone her to death.
Right.
We we take care of the baby. Um
And the
and
mother and
and the mother. And because that's why I love in the vision statement the way we say, yes, we're talking about agape, but what Baldwin is saying is you cannot achieve agape selfless love when you don't even know you don't even know what romantic love really is. It's that path. If you can't even love your wife, if you can't even love your child, how are you supposed to be part of a community? And that connection between that connection between um this connection between an individual person's internal life and the way they're able to make sense of it or free themselves or resolve certain contradictions with themselves, the connection between that and what they're capable of resolving on behalf of society. Because also this is Baldwin's point when he has, like, for example, there's a lot of sex scenes in Baldwin's novels, and Baldwin is not trying to be sexy. Baldwin is trying to say that, like, if you don't know how to love, like, there is such thing as bad sex. Like, there is such thing as, like, a parent who has a child to validate their own existence rather than having a child to love the child, for the child to be free. That happens a lot in the world. Like, people having children to validate their own life rather than having a child to have a child as, like, like you're saying, Shantanu, uh, as like a prompt, like, just having a child, and as a promise, and loving the child to be free. Like, I'm so used to that. At least I can give that example of people who are more likely to have children just to be like, at least I did something in life, rather than like really believing in the child. And I think that's a reflection. Like, the whole point is, it's a reflection of a brokenness of society. It's a reflection of how Baldwin says, I'm putting it too simplistically, but it's a reflection of a society that has been commodified by the market. I think Baldwin says that. He says, I know I'm putting it too simplistically, but it's a reflection of a society that, like, where a human relationship is something to be marketed.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
No, because what you're saying, like the new human being, that's not to be all ephemeral and like, but it is to acknowledge at the same time the fact that we are struggling for a better future, for this eternity, right? And because what you're bringing up is that sense of what I was reading recently in like if Beale Street could talk, like it's about a relationship between childhood friends from like they were in a poor neighborhood, whether it be Harlem, I don't know. But the fact stands is that what happens is that Fani, who is his real name is Alonzo, Fani had gotten arrested and is in jail for something that he didn't do. And Tish, whose real name I'm forgetting, but it was just funny the way that Baldwin is talking about, or like talking through Tish. She was saying that Fonny was talking about how his parents have sex. His mom is a more of like a saved woman, as it were, like goes to church, like sanctified, right? But his dad has a tailor shop, and Tish is like, I don't know who he tailored the clothes for, because certainly Black people can't support this shop now. Maybe people in Fani's dad's generation wore different kinds of attire to need tailor. So, but Tish was like, well, I was loved by Fani, and I was also loved by Fani's father in a way that Tish was not appreciated by as much Fani's mother and Fani's two older sisters, who resembled Fani's mother in wanting to be sanctified, saved, as it were, right? So Fani's like, well, I know when I know when Fani's parents have sex, his dad is like, well, I'll take you down and I'll save you, that kind of thing, right? And his mom is like, well, what am I gonna do with you? You no good, da da da, like that kind of thing. But then what Tish thinks about is that, well, a lot of people don't go here, but and she's talking about her and Fani, when they make love, they're able to laugh. And then they're also to make love because they're able to laugh. And then what Baldwin says is that not a lot of people can go there, in that of making love because you can laugh, and also laughing because you can make love. And I wanted to mention that because it gets down to the specifics, how you treat people. Has a different presence of mind, a different framework of mind, a different value system to consider. Oh, well, I know he just, I like, You can think in simple scenarios, whether you be at the store, or complex scenarios. How's it possible that in The Dark Princess, Du Bois writes a narrative of a poor, like the man of the South that speaks with the peoples of the world in the struggle for freedom. Like, how is that also possible? But in the same time, it can be possible because we know that people, whether that be in the ICJ or in our revolutionary history with Martin Luther King or so on and so forth, achieve a recognition for their moral commitment to revolutionary change.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that what you're pointing out, Emily, is also necessary to become a new human being. And what I think is also possible, because what we're saying is that when we're reading Baldwin, it's not like we're reading for our own sense of safety or to say something correct. We're reading Baldwin for a vision, like we had mentioned before, or clarity to go into ourselves, to think things through. So I wanted to mention that. But
Yeah. We only have a couple of minutes left, so I did want to read some of the comments that we have. We have a lot of viewers, and I'm just going to read Jeremiah's comment where he says, Baldwin and King seem to introduce a concept that love is central to a new democracy.
Yeah.
That is, new type of citizenry who assume responsibility for their country within the framework of beloved communities. So I think that that is that does combine a lot of things that we're talking about King and Baldwin. Amiri also had another comment where he says that children possess the innate wisdom of a revolutionary artist and are constantly at war with the lies they are told by our woefully loveless society. Yet, still they try courageously as Baldwin did. And I would like to just use the last couple of minutes to talk about Baldwin as a teacher, because I think that he really knew that as an artist and as a teacher, what his revolutionary imperative is, that I keep going back to what you were saying, Doc, that you repair people and then you have them repair society. That's the only way. That's the only way that you can get society to change. And how do you repair human beings? With love. And the first thing that Baldwin, I think, would agree upon is that where you start is by loving the child. And you can see that loving a child can lead to them performing absolutely revolutionary acts throughout their lives. And I would like to just mention that in the universities across the globe right now, students are rising up and shaking the very foundation of the elite, the white Zionist elites who run these institutions. And as they protest for Palestine, for Gaza, and what does this say? This says that the youth, whether they know it or not, they are turning to King. They are turning to the civil rights movement. The moral guiding force of what we see today started with Baldwin and King and Du Bois, right? And we are going to start reading Baldwin next week, and the youth, the children, and the immortal child is going to be central to our discussion next week. So I would just like to ask if any one of our guests had any concluding remarks before we end out this first episode of our podcast.
Yeah, I would just wish to congratulate you all on putting this first episode together, and it was a good job. And I would say to the audience for this podcast, the best is yet to come. And I encourage those who do not necessarily agree with this approach to feel free to express their views. You know, and I agree with you, Santanu. Young people and students are rising up all over the world in reaction to the Israeli genocide. But at the same time, we say to the youth of the world, to the people of the world, that without ideas, the future is dim.
Right.
And at least in the midst of all of the difficulties and complexities, a vanguard must consolidate itself and assert itself. And I think there's no better place to begin than with the ideas of James Baldwin.
Yeah, I just want to follow up what Tony's saying, and I love that we ended with James Baldwin as a teacher, because I think James Baldwin would also say that, and I get this from Go Tell It on the Mountain, his first novel, that children are our teachers, and children are Baldwin's teacher. Because this thing about, you know, we talked a lot about love this episode, which I think is so fitting. But I think in a lot of ways, connecting everything we talked about, all children are born to love, white, black, no matter the race. It is society, this American white supremacist society, that beats it out of them or teaches them in various ways, explicit and implicit, not to love, to distrust that impulse, which is the revolutionary impulse, which is to love and to live.
Yeah.
And I think, like in Go Tell It on the Mountain, the main character, John, who is really James Baldwin, John has to make that courageous choice, which is to say, I want to live and I want to love. And I think in some ways, James Baldwin always kept that kernel from his childhood, which all children have. And it's the revolutionary kernel, to make the moral choice, to have a sense of morality, to want to love, even if it's risky or punishable by society. And I think, and I just think I'm really excited for the second episode. And I think this is such an important format for people to be able to hear this kind of candid conversation about James Baldwin and its relevance in our own lives, as young people, as people who are facing a society at war with itself.
Actually, just to emphasize and add to a statement that Santanu made at the beginning, which is that to assert that in a time of crisis and in a time of change, that Baldwin is relevant for the future, especially as when Baldwin says that actually many people want to be fools, actually want to be lied to, because that's also where people are safe. But in a time of change, what will give us all a anchoring and courage as well to face these changes and to make sense of these changes, and to grow in this process. Because as he says, you know, we Americans have a lot of growing up to do.
That was brilliant. Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Well, thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to having you in 2 weeks from now, 3rd of March, same time, 4 p.m. On Sundays. So see you all in 2 weeks.
The logic of despair is for me, you know, cut your throat, right? But there's something wrong, you know, someone who says he's in despair keeps on writing. Because a despairing man doesn't write. Anyway, it's too easy, it's too fashionable. I'm aware, you know, that I and the people I love may perish in the morning. I know that. But there's a light on our faces now. If you live under the shadow of death, it gives you a certain freedom. So I'm perfectly happy, out of the town, and relatively free.
Tomorrow is my turn to receive without giving, to make life worth the living, for it's my life I'm living, and my only concern, for tomorrow is my turn.